Coming in at number 9 is The Young and the Restless. So they've been in last place the last 2 months that I did this. They finally go up. Because there's no home and away this month for December, I guess they kind of went up 2 spots from 11th to 9th. But really, they're just second to last still. Not a, I mean, the minor improvements actually, but I still feel like as a whole, Young and the Restless remains rather boring soap opera where not a whole lot happens on a weekly basis, and that remains why it remains towards the bottom of this list. Once again, just like I did for Days, I'm going to talk about the writing because I feel like that is the biggest problem on both of these shows. When it comes to Young and the Restless, the head writer and producer is Josh Griffith. Now, way back in the day, in the 90s, he and Michael Malone did some great writing on One Life to Live together as co-head writers. But I feel like Josh Griffith has never been able to prove himself on his own. And I guess you can kind of say the same for Michael Malone, but I don't really think that's the case because Michael Malone, at least as a somewhat successful author of books, he came from that land when he started writing on the soap opera. And his writing at first without Josh in the 90s was still pretty good. So I just feel like, and I'm going to use a wrestling comparison, that Josh Griffith is the Marty Jannetty of soap writers because, and it's not necessarily that Michael Malone is the Shawn Michaels to go on to have this very successful soap opera writing career, but he has a author career in his own right, like I've said. Meanwhile, Josh Griffith just continues to put out this boring ass soap opera. I do feel like together the second stint on One Life to Live isn't that popular. I don't think it was that bad, honestly. It wasn't as good as their first run in the 90s, but it still wasn't that bad. So together they can write good soap opera, almost a groundbreaking soap opera. I don't know why separate it doesn't quite work out, especially for Josh Griffith. He's never been able to even find another writing partner that he writes good with. I don't know if he's just lazy. I don't know if he's a lazy writer. I think that has a lot to do with it. Honestly, I do. Or, maybe to his credit, it could just be dealing with networks because I feel like a lot of the problems with American soap operas and American TV shows in general come from the networks putting in their own 2 cents all the time that don't really work for the shows. And I do feel like that happens with the soap operas a lot. So is it completely Josh Griffith's fault? Probably not. But is he still being a lazy ass writer? Yes, he is. I feel like one of the main things coming into December was Chance and Abby. Yeah, I saw on social media they tried to call this couple Chabby, which is the name for Chad and Abby on Days of Our Lives. So I don't think that's going to be able to stick without going into the Days of Our Lives stand base of that couple. But they're really trying to make this couple the Chabby of Young and the Restless, but they're not interesting at all, is the problem. The character of Abby is boring, really always has been. And I don't think Chance is going to bring a lot, despite bringing possible PTSD to the story. I feel like where they're going to go is Chance not liking Devon's bond with baby Dominic, and Devon's probably going to want some rights to baby Dominic. So yeah, that was kind of the main story coming into December. Not entertaining television still, unfortunately. Chelsea came back. She and Adam are kind of calling a truce. I don't really see this as a story that's worth talking about either because it's just not. I guess one of the only decent stories going on this show, which is why I do think there was at least some improvements, because I feel like in the past when I've talked about Young and the Restless, it's been about how boring it is and I just can't get into it at all because they were doing really bad storytelling, and they still are. But I feel like at least with the character of Billy and Adam at least bring a little intrigue onto the show. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's still enough for me to be interested in some of these episodes at least a little bit. They're still talking about Billy's gambling problem, and he's had addiction problems in the past, so they're bringing that up again. We have Adam basically trying to make Billy have a downfall. Adam is using Sally to keep spying on Billy and to kind of push Billy's downfall along, but Billy might be onto that. So on one hand, we're getting this possible new coupling of Adam and Sally, which I can get on board. I think they are two intriguing enough characters to be a couple. And this is at least a storyline that I find watchable. And that's why Young and the Restless is not in last place, because I found pretty much no stories on days to be watchable for the month of December. And honestly, in general for December, most of the soap operas were subpar. Unfortunately, the quality was pretty subpar in December, other than maybe for the top few. But yeah, once again, it comes down to the writing with The Young and the Restless, just like with Days, just like probably the next soap opera in this rankings that I will talk about. Even down to some of the dialogue, because we had Victor talking about Adam's love life using the word entanglement. I felt like that was like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge by the writing, like Victor's using the word entanglement. Like old Victor can be hip to slang. I rolled my eyes when Victor described Adam's love life as entanglements, but whatever. The Christmas episode, I mean, at least Young and the Restless tried to make the Christmas week seem Christmassy. I felt like most of the soap operas in these rankings didn't. So the Christmas Nicholas episode was like a ripoff of Christmas movies in the past. It was weak, but they tried. I give them at least a C plus for effort with that. But as a whole, I still think the show needs a lot more effort than it gets, especially from Josh Griffith and the rest of the producers, and even the rest of the writing team with some of their dialogue sometimes. So Young and the Restless gets up a spot, second to last rather than last. It's in 9th place in December. Going into January, at least I see a little bit of interest, as I talked about, but it still needs to bring a whole lot more if it's ever going to get any higher than the bottom of these rankings.